Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 109 based on novel. So let's start. In a vast expanse of white heaven and earth, the sun and moon are gone, the snow is flying, and thousands of blue lights shoot out from the cracks between a pile of gravel, pointing straight to the sky like a sharp sword. In the void beyond the blue light, the three eagles were standing on it, and their eyes looked at the gravel pile under Xiao Yang at the moment. The boulders were broken, and the cold wind surged up. The broken boulders were constantly blown out by the cold wind. The general outline of the canyon also appeared in front of the three eagles again. Beside Tianying, Murong Chanshan has also fully awakened. Recalling the strength shown by Xiao Yang at first, his eyebrows and eyes can't help showing a deeply shocked color. When the four people turned their eyes to Xiao Yang at the moment, their pupils could not help but shrink slightly at this moment, and the expression on their faces also stagnated. On the cold wind canyon-like ruins, Xiao Yang stepped on the void. With his every step, the forest white flame at his feet diffused out. Wherever the flame passed, the cold wind between heaven and earth was erased in an instant, and even the void became hot at this moment. Finally, when Xiao Yang stood in the middle of the canyon, all the cold air between heaven and earth had dissipated except his feet. The field of inflammation. Qi. The faint voice of words came out slowly from Xiao Yang's mouth. It was not loud, but it rang through the world like a burst of thunder. The whole world was buzzing at the moment. With the words in Xiao Yang's mouth falling, the dark white flame light curtain under Xiao Yang's feet also rose sharply in this moment, turning into a burning flame, and rising violently in this sky with a terrible momentum like burning the sky. Although Tianying and Xiao Yang are far away, Rao is so. At such a distance, they still feel the hot temperature in the air. This terrible temperature makes their breathing become a little sluggish. Several people solemnly stared at the terrible flame rising around Xiao Yang's body. Their original pale face turned red and sweat poured out rapidly in this short moment. At the same time, their eyes when they looked at the white flame were full of horror. What kind of flame is it that can make them unable to face these 9.5 emperors? Although many of the reasons are from their current state, even so, it is enough to let them see the horror of the flame. This is the 11th in the list of different fires. Bone Spirit Cold Fire. Among them, except the eldest Miss Murong Chanshan, Tianying has the highest experience. Therefore, after careful observation for a long time, Tianying finally spit out a voice full of horror in his tone. As soon as Tianying said this, the look on their faces became shocked in an instant. The burning lion and the bear just looked at each other, and their faces were more shocked than one. Unexpectedly, the forest white flame in front of them would be the 11th Bone Spirit Cold Fire on the list of different fires. Who the hell is this guy? He can have such a powerful strange fire. His eyes showed a dignified color and stared at the forest white flame around Xiao Yang's body. The muscles on the Yang lion's face couldn't help twitching violently, and his mouth was also very frightened. Hearing the speech, Tianying and Xionggang on one side could not help frowning. Although they had known that Xiao Yang was carrying a different fire, they all knew that it was just a child fire in a different fire. For this kind of fire, it was not uncommon on the mainland. Therefore, they could fully accept it. But now, with such a strong smell of strange fire, the strange fire released by Xiao Yang at the moment is by no means comparable to ordinary subfire. Only the real origin of different fire can erupt. Therefore, this will make Tianying three people feel so shocked by the Bone Spirit Cold Fire released by Xiao Yang at the moment. At the same time, over the canyon, Xiao Yang looked at the canyon like a pile of rubble. Immediately, the soles of his feet gently stepped on the void. Suddenly, an overwhelming threat of terror swept out of Xiao Yang's body, like a flash flood. In an instant, he suppressed the cold wind roaring from the cracks below. Seeing this scene, the look on the faces of Tianying and others couldn't help changing again, and they felt incomparable horror for it in their hearts. However, Xiao Yang in the sky immediately raised his right hand and spread his palm upward in the void in front of him. His heart moved and burst, and the forest white fire immediately rose in the palm. Immediately, Xiao Yang twisted his wrist, and his white palm controlled the senbei fire in his hand, seemingly turning down at will. Boom! Xiao Yang's palm seemed casual, but at the moment when Xiao Yang's palm turned down, the void under Xiao Yang's feet suddenly turned into a huge different fire palm, covering the whole earth. Bang! When Xiao Yang's palm fell, the huge different fire palm also bombarded the whole earth below with a loud bang. Suddenly, the whole depths of the Shalin Mountains trembled violently at the moment. The Xiaoyan Mountains, which had just been calm, startled again. Countless warcraft ran around like frightened birds. At the same time, at the foot of Xiao Yang, the rubble pile was smashed down under a terrible force. The whole strange fire palm was directly embedded in the earth and suppressed the whole canyon under it, together with those crushed stones and ice. Xiao Yang's palm directly created a huge basin on this land. The terrible power of the strange fire palm flattened the bottom of the basin without even a crack, and the canyon under it was filled up under this palm. Hiss. Seeing this scene, Tianying and others immediately couldn't help taking a breath, and the look on their faces became more and more wonderful. In the twinkling of an eye, the previously terrible cold wind canyon was kneaded like a mud doll in front of Xiao Yang. The terrible cold wind that was enough to destroy the whole Xiaoyan Mountains was crushed by Xiao Yang's slap. It has to be said that this scene, in the eyes of Tianying III, is something they can't even think of, but now it appears in front of them, which makes them feel like a dream. Of course, looking at their companions, they don't doubt that what happened in front of them is a terrible scene, but it really happened. After solving the canyon and eliminating the hidden dangers in front of him, at the moment, the guilt in Xiao Yang's heart was finally erased. Most of the reasons for his action are Murong Qianxian and others. Of course, another small part is that Tianying and others said it was because of him. In Xiao Yang's opinion, the destruction of the East Wall was caused by him. Naturally, he should come forward to solve it. Previously, he thought he didn't have to do it, but now that he has done it, he will never leave any hidden dangers. If you just suppress the huge crack in front of you, Xiao Yang has 100 ways at the moment, but this method is only temporary after all. The symptoms are not the root cause. The cold wind will break out again in a few hundred years at the latest. When he is away, even if the three Tianying break through the fighting emperor, they can't seal it according to the power of the cold wind. Therefore, Xiao Yang must find a way to completely solve the cold wind today. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang could not help frowning. The cold wind gushed from the ground, and the seal of mankind can only be kept for 100 years. If the root of the cold wind cannot be found, then we must find a way from the ground. Pay him back in his own way. Frown and think for a moment. Xiao Yang quickly showed a smile in front of him. He almost forgot that under the earth, in addition to the thick rock and soil, there is still hot magma in the depths. It is also the power of heaven and earth. Its horror is no better than different fire, but it is also infinitely better. Isn't it perfect to fight the endless cold wind with the power of heaven and earth? Just do it when you think of it. Even if Xiao Yang closes his eyes and reads in his heart, the terrible soul power in the center of his eyebrows surges out rapidly and spreads rapidly to the depths of the earth below. After a while, under the exploration of Xiao Yang's soul power, he had felt an extremely hot high temperature. The magma emitting terrible high temperature surges continuously in the depths of the earth like seawater. The terrible momentum is like a giant dragon at the bottom of the magma. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang couldn't help recalling that under the Tianfen gas tower of Canaan University, there seemed to be a mysterious creature that could survive in the magma and looked like a lizard. It was also at that time that Xiao Yang met the Dragon Emperor, Zhu Kuan, of the ancient dragon family of Taishu for the first time. Now looking back, all these things are like yesterday's events, which makes Xiao Yang feel a burst of sigh. Taking back his mind, the terrible soul power in Xiao Yang's body suddenly spread out and reached the bottom of the earth. His mind moved, and the forest white fire suddenly rose in the depths of the earth. It's you. With a smile in his heart, Xiao Yang's mind moved. Suddenly, the magma under the ground suddenly surged violently. As Xiao Yang's mind fell, he quickly broke the rock and soil and rushed up to the surface. Bang! With an earth-shaking bang, the red magma gushed out from under the earth like a flame dragon, jumped into the void, and soon fell heavily, just like a fountain, gushing out rapidly at the center of the palm-shaped basin, gradually filling the whole basin. When the hot magma filled the whole depression basin, Xiao Yang recovered the released soul power. At the same time, Tianying and others outside the field were shocked and speechless about the scene that emerged at the moment. From a high altitude, the basin filled with magma at the moment looks like a huge red handprint emitting hot fire. With the flood of magma, the snow within hundreds of feet around the basin melted and dissipated rapidly. Then, Tianying several people could see that countless narrow magma tributaries, like blood vessels, spread out from the magma lake. On one side, they spread to the mountains and forests hundreds of feet away, and on the other side, they were close to the snow peak to resist the cold wind from the end of the snow peak. At the same time, when the cold wind between heaven and earth dissipates, the original white foggy sky also dissipates, revealing the blue sky that has not appeared between heaven and earth for a long time, and the rising sun that emits dazzling light. His eyes retreated, Xiao Yang swept the hot magma surging like a lake below his eyes, and his heart finally relaxed slowly. With these magma as the source of power to suppress the cold wind here will not easily gush out again in at least the next 1,000 years. With this in mind, Xiao Yang couldn't help but show a relaxed smile like a relieved burden on his face. Then, he stepped on the void, paced slowly, and returned to the front of Tianying again. Until this time, Tianying and others converged the color of horror on their face and tried to calm their mood and make themselves look normal in front of Xiao Yang. However, after what happened just now, the three Tianying never dared to treat Xiao Yang as an ordinary person, nor did they dare to continue to regard him as a person of the same level. After all, even those terrible cold winds can be easily destroyed. How can they compare Xiao Yang's strength? Therefore, when Xiao Yang appeared in front of several people, although they were ready to face Xiao Yang with an ordinary heart, when they felt the terrible smell emanating from Xiao Yang again, their bodies couldn't help shaking together, and a cold sweat burst out on their foreheads. Their bodies almost bowed and arched at Xiao Yang like a reflex. At the same time, he said respectfully, "Younger generation Tianying, thank you for your help this time." At the same time, the later two Yang lions also bowed their hands to Xiao Yang and said respectfully. Seeing the appearance suddenly revealed by the three people in front of Xiao Yang couldn't help feeling a little surprised. Immediately after that, he quickly understood and smiled. In the middle of a pair of eyes, the forest white flame light converged. Xiao Yang's pale face also recovered the previous easygoing appearance, smiled at the three people in front of him and said, "Three brothers, why are you so polite? Put it away." With that, Xiao Yang stroked his big sleeve, and an invisible force spread out, helping the three people who still looked like bowing in front of him. First I heard Xiao Yang's words, and then I saw Xiao Yang's behavior. Tianying three couldn't help looking at each other in the dark. Then they resolutely took back their thoughts. When they got up, they arched their hands at Xiao Yang again, and the latter waved their hands at will to show that they didn't care. "Thank you very much, Mr. Xiao Yang. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid we would have been completely frozen in the cold wind." Tianying hugged Xiao Yang and arched his hands again. Seeing that the latter insisted on bowing, Xiao Yang stopped talking, just smiled and said, "Hey, brother Tianying, why should I say this? I just don't want the cold wind to destroy the Shaolin Mountains." Hearing the speech, the latter also echoed with it, smiled and immediately said again, "Anyway, the cold wind was sealed by Mr. Xiao Yang. The three of our brothers thank Mr. Xiao Yang for his kindness." When the words fell down, the three Tianying wanted to hug and bow their hands to Xiao Yang again, and Xiao Yang quickly made a voice to stop it, but at this time, on the other side, after Xiao Yang flashed and appeared, a pair of beautiful eyes stared at Xiao Yang's Murong Chanshan, and finally made a voice at this moment, which stopped the Tianying who wanted to speak in the field. "Xiao Yang, I just want to ask you, who are you?" For the girl's sudden question, Xiao Yang couldn't help but change slightly. Even the three Tianying in front of him were stunned for a moment. Then he hurried back to his mind and looked at Murong Chanshan. At present, Xiao Yang's strength is terrible. It's such a time. If Murong Chanshan still dares to play with her eldest lady's temper, wouldn't it be dangerous if he angered Xiao Yang? However, just when the three eagles were worried about this, Xiao Yang shook his head with a helpless wry smile and immediately smiled at Murong Chanshan. "I am not who, I am Xiao Yang. Then your strength now is your real cultivation?" Hearing Xiao Yang's words, the girl frowned slightly, but finally nodded. Immediately after that, she asked again in a suspicious tone. In this regard, Xiao Yang shook his head with a bitter smile. Although at the moment, with the help of Guyo's power, he can have super combat power, but this is only in a short time. With the help of Jiuyu's strength, it is also a great load for Xiao Yang himself. The powerful power is constantly filling Xiao Yang's body. If it goes on like this for a long time, the power will hurt Xiao Yang's cultivation foundation sooner or later. Once there is any damage and sequelae, it is very important for Xiao Yang. It can be called a devastating blow. Seeing Xiao Yang shaking his head, Murong Chanshan's beautiful eyes changed slightly, but her heart was still full of questions about Xiao Yang's sudden strength. Then the girl turned her eyebrows and wanted to ask Xiao Yang again. But just as the girl was about to speak, Xiao Yang frowned and asked first. "I said, you asked so many questions, can I ask?" Hearing the speech, the girl's pretty face was slightly stunned. Even if she nodded, the Tianying three people on one side could not help showing a curious look on their faces and looked at Xiao Yang. "I just saved you again. I don't know. Can I ask you to take me into the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains now?" Hearing Xiao Yang's words, The girl's pretty face suddenly turned black. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yang was still thinking about entering the hinterland of Shaolin mountain range, but immediately, the girl frowned and asked Xiao Yang in a confused tone. Don't you already have such strong power? Don't you have to let me take you in? With your current power, you can easily cross the hinterland of Shaolin by yourself. Smell speech. Xiao Yang is a face-pale wry smile, shake his head, the heart reads a move, the breath of terror in the body slowly fades at the moment, the already pale face becomes bloodless at this moment. This is my real cultivation. Feeling the power rapidly losing in his body, finally, Xiao Yang's body softened, and the world in front of him suddenly became dark. Soon, the whole person fell face to face Murong Qianqian. In the twinkling of an eye, a week later, on the stone bed in a stone chamber in Tianying's cave, Xiao Yang was unconscious for 7 days, and finally woke up slowly at this moment. The steady deliberately appears to be continuous and powerful. Xiao Yang's pale face has completely recovered its ruddy color, and his white hair has also returned to darkness. The tired color between the eyebrows dissipated with the 7 days of sleep. At a certain moment, Xiao Yang's eyelids trembled slightly and the muscles in the corners of his eyes trembled slightly. Immediately, the slightly heavy eyelids slowly opened, revealing his dark eyes as bright as 2 black pearls. The eyes turned slightly, and Xiao Yang's body just woke up seemed a little weak. Soon, Xiao Yang's body lying flat on the stone bed shook slightly, his vigorous body sat up quickly, and the fatigue in his body dissipated quickly. He twisted his body slightly. Suddenly, the crackling sound of bone collision came from Xiao Yang's body and felt the comfort from the bone collision. Xiao Yang couldn't help breathing a long breath in his mouth. Immediately, he looked up at the surrounding world. When Xiao Yang saw the familiar rock buildings around him, his heart immediately reflected that the bottom he was at the moment was the cave of Tianying. With this in mind, Xiao Yang's thoughts about what happened 7 days ago also quickly rushed to his mind, and the dialogue with Murong Qianqian and others before he was unconscious was also remembered by Xiao Yang at this moment. Murong Qianqian. By the way, where's Murong Qianqian? I didn't ask her if she could help me enter the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains. She hasn't answered me yet. Thinking of Murong Qianqian, Xiao Yang immediately thought of entering the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains. Even if he couldn't help crying out, his heart was full of questions about Murong Qianqian's answer that day. Entering the hinterland of Shaolin mountain range is imperative for Xiao Yang at the moment. Without a definite answer, Xiao Yang naturally can't be at ease. Smelly boy, as soon as you wake up, you think of a woman. That day is my strength to support you, otherwise you can solve the cold wind. How come as soon as you wake up, you just don't thank me? It's ungrateful to still think of a woman here. Hearing the startling voice from Xiao Yang's mouth, the bone in his body immediately seemed to be wronged. He glanced his mouth in the dark, and immediately said something slightly depressed to Xiao Yang's tone. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang just recovered. His face looked a little embarrassed. He smiled and quickly smiled at the bone in his body. Hihi, Jiu Lao, I know my mistake. It's really your credit to seal the crack last time. I'll thank you for them. Hearing Xiao Yang's words, Jiu just laughed and his mood improved. However, Xiao Yang spoke again, and the look on Jiu's old face also became gloomy. Hey, so old, can you tell me now whether Murong Qianqian promised to take me into the hinterland of Shaolin mountain range that day? In this regard, Guyo resolutely chose silence, while Xiao Yang frowned and was a little anxious. He was very concerned about the result. Whether it was right or not was related to whether he could cross the Shaolin mountains. Therefore, Xiao Yang dared not have the slightest carelessness in his heart. Kaka. However, at this time, the heavy stone door in the stone chamber was opened from the outside. While Xiao Yang raised his eyes, 2 figures came in from the outside one after another. It is Tianying and Murong Qianqian. As soon as they stepped into the stone chamber, they saw Xiao Yang sitting beside the stone bed at the first sight. Immediately, the steps that Tianying and Murong Qianqian had just taken stopped in the air. At the same time, the look on their faces solidified, as if time were static at this moment. Seeing this, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing. At the same time, Tianying and Murong Qianqian came back to their senses. Suddenly, a surprise color rushed into their eyes. Ha, Mr. Xiao Yang, you finally woke up. You don't know how worried we are about you during your coma for 7 days. In a flash, what came from Tianying's mouth was a heroic laugh. At the same time, Tianying came to Xiao Yang with a few big steps. Seeing the visitor, Xiao Yang stood up from the stone bed when Tianying came to him. Facing the words of Tianying, Xiao Yang even hugged the former and glanced at Murong Chanxian behind him. Immediately, he began to laugh. Hehe, I'm really sorry to worry you. While talking, Xiao Yang also knew from Tianying's words that he had been unconscious for 7 days. Ha ha, it doesn't hurt the three of us. After some exploration, we know the cause of your coma, but it's hard for our young lady. She can't trust you. She hasn't been away from you these days. The words fell, and a complex look passed on the eagle's face. He secretly glanced at Murong Chanxian behind him, but found that the latter was looking at him with a man-eating expression, which made the eagle suddenly feel cold on his back. Cough. Hurriedly coughed twice. The eagle quickly turned around and hid behind Murong Chanxian with a smile on his face. Seeing the beauty in front of him again, Xiao Yang's face turned a little red. The words that had already reached his mouth were also stubbornly blocked between the teeth. Seeing Xiao Yang's appearance, Murong Chanxian's pretty face could not help but show a blush. As soon as her beautiful eyes turned, she felt thoughtful in her heart. She even slightly pursed her red lips and said, "Well, don't listen to his nonsense. Miss Ben won't worry about you. If you can have such strong power, how can you die so easily?" Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing bitterly in his heart, while Murong Chanxian glanced at Xiao Yang and then said, "But now that you're all right, let's go." Huh. Hearing Murong Chanxian's unknown words, Xiao Yang couldn't help looking a little stunned. He immediately had a doubt in his heart. He said softly, frowned and asked, "Go? Where?" Seeing this, Murong Chanxian, who had pretended to be calm, couldn't help but burst into a smile on his pretty face. As soon as his beautiful eyes turned, he looked hard at Xiao Yang, snorted, and said angrily, "Didn't you say you wanted to enter the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains? Since you helped us seal the cold wind and saved us, the most important thing is to save Miss Ben. That's not too much." Miss Ben reluctantly agreed to you. While the voice fell, the girl was also prepared with both hands. Her delicate body turned in place like a blooming lotus. With a playful smile, she turned and walked outside the stone chamber. Later, when Xiao Yang heard the sudden news, his face, which had seemed at a loss, suddenly appeared a look of ecstasy. He moved and hurried to follow up. In a short moment, Xiao Yang and Murong Chanxian came to the snow peak again. Later, Tianying and Yang Lion followed closely. As the cold wind was suppressed by Xiao Yang for a long time, the original land covered with ice and snow changed into a new color. The red magma flows on this land. The vast magma looks like a lake, emitting a hot high temperature, making the whole world extremely dry and hot. The magma tributaries, like veins in the human body, gradually spread away from the edge of the magma lake towards the mountains and forests beyond the line of sight. Only when they were close to the vast mountains and forests did they gradually stop spreading further. On the other side of the magmatic lake, the towering snow peak stands at the end of the magmatic lake like a giant. The cold wind swirls around the snow peak, sending out bursts of wind howls like animal roars. The white snow condensed into a snow-white flying dragon under the cold wind. After a whistling in the sky, it spread out with a bang and fell slowly from the 9 days. At this time, at the junction of the magmatic lake and the snow peak, Xiao Yang and his party were standing on the void. Their eyes swept over the magmatic lake below from time to time, and their eyes showed different looks. Looking at the lava lake below, even if it made Tianying feel a little dangerous, Tianying's eyes couldn't help showing a touch of surprise. At the moment, although the cold wind around the snow peak is not weak, when the cold wind is about to fall, it will be dissolved by a more fiery vigorous wind from bottom to top. In this repeated cycle, the cold wind can no longer sweep into the mountains and forests outside the snow peak. Seeing this scene, Tianying couldn't help but marvel. Of course, the burning lion and Xiong Gang beside him were naturally shocked by this scene. Before the three, Xiao Yangjing and Murong Chanxian stood side by side and looked at the scene of ice and fire in front of them. Their thoughts were different. Looking at the magma lake below, Murong Chanxian couldn't help but recall the strong posture shown by Xiao Yang 7 days ago, and there was a brilliant flow in his beautiful eyes. As for Xiao Yang, when he thought that he would enter the hinterland of Shaolin Mountain Range immediately, he was immediately excited like beating chicken blood. After all, after careful calculation, Xiao Yang has entered Shaolin Mountain Range for nearly a year and a half, and he expected to cross Shaolin Mountain Range for only more than half a year. I thought it would not be a problem as long as I could cross the territory of the 3 eagles. But who knew that the cold wind was so terrible that Xiao Yang delayed again and again. Now, therefore, with the opportunity to cross the hinterland of Shaolin Mountain Range, Xiao Yang's mood is naturally difficult to calm down. Who? After gazing for a long time, Murong Qianqian finally took back his eyes and looked at the other side of the snow peak. The essence of the long and narrow beautiful eyes flowed. Immediately, a cunning smile appeared on the lovely face. Seeing the change of look on the girl's pretty face, Xiao Yang also couldn't help but frown. He couldn't help showing a suspicious color on his face, and then he flashed away. Then, in Xiao Yang's eyes, the young girl slowly stretched out her white and tender jade hand from under her sleeve robe. Immediately, there was a flash of light in the palm of her hand, and a jade card emitting ying green light appeared in the palm of Murong Qianqian's hand. Seeing this jade plaque, Xiao Yang's face immediately changed and turned into a surprise. This jade plate is the Kai Hanyu that can resist the terrible cold wind. Seeing the surprised expression on Xiao Yang's face, the girl couldn't help but show a smile on her pretty face, and then her heart moved. The fighting spirit in her body quickly gushed out and poured into the jade card in her hand. With the injection of Murong Qianqian's fighting spirit, the jade card emitting soft blue light immediately diffused a strange energy to wrap Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian's body. Feeling the strange energy around him, Xiao Yang couldn't help but pick his eyebrows slightly. Immediately, his heart moved. In the center of his eyebrows, a powerful soul force poured out, trying to explore the energy breath of Kai Hanyu. However, the final result surprised Xiao Yang, because under the exploration of his soul power, the result was like a ethereal breath like nothingness. Xiao Yang could not capture the energy of Kai Hanyu. While Xiao Yang was stunned at this, Murong Qianqian on one side smiled and ignored Xiao Yang on the other side. Her delicate body moved and flew to the other side of the snow peak. Then, seeing Murong Qianqian was about to leave, the three of Tianying bowed their hands in the direction of the girl's departure, and said respectfully, "Congratulations, miss." In this regard, Murong Qianqian raised his jade hand, and the back of his delicate hand gently waved to the three people behind him. At the same time, Xiao Yang also came back to his mind at the moment when the words fell. His face changed slightly and quickly followed up. At present, he has to rely on this girl to cross the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains. If this little girl runs away first, won't Xiao Yang be able to leave here again? With Kai Hanyu, with the blessing of that strange energy, Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian crossed the snow-capped peak without resistance and officially entered the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains. Of course, this is only the edge of the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains. There is still a long distance from the so-called real hinterland core. If Xiao Yang wants to cross here, it will take longer. When Xiao Yang stepped on the void and looked relaxed over the majestic snow peak at his feet, he couldn't help getting a burst of excitement in his heart. Can he still remember that when he first came here a few months ago, it was very difficult for him to step on the broken slope, and Xiao Yang didn't think about crossing the snow peak at his feet with such ease at the moment. But now, he really crossed the snow peak so easily. Xiao Yang suddenly felt that things are right and people are wrong in his heart. I don't know why I took a long breath in my heart. Maybe it was the ease of successfully entering the hinterland of Shaolin. Maybe it was also the sigh of what I just thought in my heart. Xiao Yang stood on the void, stared at the right side, immediately nodded heavily, moved, quickly followed Murong Qianqian's footsteps and flew away to the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains. In the twinkling of an eye, it has been half a day since Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian entered the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains. For half a day, Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian were restless, but Rao was so. At this time, they were still a long distance from the center of Shaolin's hinterland. On the way forward side by side with Murong Qianqian, Xiao Yang suddenly thought of a question he had been puzzled about for a long time. After thinking for a long time, Xiao Yang finally looked at the girl beside him, his eyes twinkled slightly, then hesitated a little and asked, "By the way, I've always wanted to ask you a question. I wonder if you can answer it for me." Hearing Xiao Yang's sudden words, Murong Qianqian's pretty face showed a look of doubt, then he nodded gently, stared at Xiao Yang with beautiful eyes and said, "You ask." Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang nodded slightly, then pondered a little and said, "If my guess is right, there should be at least one strong fighter in the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains." Seeing this, the look on Murong Qianqian's pretty face could not help but change slightly. Even the steps of flying forward could not help but have a slight meal. The girl frowned slightly, but finally nodded slightly. Seeing this, Xiao Yang nodded, frowned again and asked, "But in that case, why didn't he show up when the cold wind broke out? With his strength, he should be able to suppress the cold wind. At least, he won't let the Skyhawks end up like that. That's for a reason. Moreover, Shaolin Mountains have rules here. The east wall is broken, which is the responsibility of the three of them. There are Sifong mountain walls in the hinterland of Shaolin Mountains, which are guarded by people. If Xifang Mountain walls are broken one day, do you want the owner of Shalin Mountains to seal them in person? Listening to the implied meaning of complaining in Xiao Yang's voice, Murong Qianqian's pretty face also suddenly sank, and his tone was low and harsh to Xiao Yang. But no matter what the reason is, he can't sit back and ignore it. The east wall collapsed this time. If it wasn't for me, not only the eagles could not live, but also you are equally dangerous. Is it that he doesn't care about such a situation? However, for Murong Qianqian's answer, the tone in Xiao Yang's mouth also increased, and some words fell, leaving the girl speechless. Although the girl had a clear answer to why she didn't do it, at the same time, because of the identity relationship between them and Xiao Yang, this can't be said clearly, which makes Murong Qianqian feel bitter and unspeakable. However, just when Xiao Yang was about to continue questioning, Murong Qianqian suddenly heard a dull bang in their hands, and then the next moment, the strange energy originally wrapped around Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian dissipated quickly. At the same time, the look on the faces of Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian changed instantly. Bang! With a low bang, the look on Murong Qianqian's pretty face suddenly changed. The girl's lips gently pushed, and a trace of red blood flowed down from the corners of the girl's mouth. At the same time, in Murong Qianqian's rapidly raised jade hand, the Kai Hanyu emitting ying blue light has been broken into two parts for some reason, and the cyan fluorescence condensed on it also dissipates rapidly. At the same time, the strange energy that had enveloped Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian also dissipated rapidly. Between heaven and earth, the cold wind was like a hungry wolf who had coveted them for a long time, and rushed at Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian in the void. The sudden change in the field also changed Xiao Yang's face. Without Kai Hanyu, Xiao Yang felt terrible in the face of the terrible cold wind in the hinterland. According to the power of the cold wind, even if Xiao Yang tries his best, he can't support it for too long under the cold wind, let alone there is a Murong Qianqian around him at the moment. However, at the moment, the cold wind has hit. Seeing that he and Murong Qianqian have become turtles in a jar, Xiao Yang will never sit and wait to die. If it's a big deal, let Guyo do it again. If not, he can only withdraw from the hinterland of Shalin first. Although Xiao Yang feels a little sorry at the thought of not being able to cross the hinterland of Shalin Mountains, Xiao Yang still cherishes his life more than if he broke through at the moment. Drink. In the cold wind, Xiao Yang's body was shocked violently, and his fighting spirit quickly gushed out of his body. Different fire surged. Around Xiao Yang's body, it quickly condensed into a different fire barrier to temporarily resist the fierce cold wind from around. At the same time, Xiao Yang hugged Murong Qianqian in his arms, waved his right hand, and the Xian heavy ruler also appeared in the palm at the same time. The huge ruler waved and made a heavy wind-breaking sound in the void. Hiss, hiss. At the moment when the cold wind collided with Xiao Yang's different fire, there was a violent hissing sound on the void. The thick white fog rose from around the different fire. Immediately under the cold wind, it condensed into pieces of cold ice-sharp blades. The sharp blades waved with the wind and bombarded Xiao Yang's different fire barrier again. Hiss, hiss. Under such endless bombardment, Xiao Yang frowned. The cold wind was extremely fierce, and it was endless in the hinterland of Shalin. Although his strange fire was strong, the more fierce he was, the steam burned in the void would be used again by the cold wind, making it more and more brave, and he could only be in a passive state. If it continues like this, it will not be a good result for Xiao Yang. In a short moment, around Xiao Yang's strange fire, it has been covered by many ice blades. The space around the sky is dense everywhere, but Xiao Yang can only resist with different fire. Damn it! The cold wind is really troublesome. If you can't burn all the steam in the cold wind, it will be useless in the end. Seeing the danger of those cold winds, the look on Xiao Yang's face also became fierce, and the palm holding the Xian heavy ruler in his right hand also exerted more and more force. Xiao Yang, don't talk. You're hurt. Let's quit now. As for crossing the Shalin Mountains, let's make other plans. Murong Qianqian in his arms just wanted to speak, but Xiao Yang blocked her words in his mouth with a low drink. At the same time, Xiao Yang's feet changed and Tianju's step was displayed. At the same time, his body turned fiercely, and the dark heavy ruler in his right hand waved violently. Immediately after that, a magnificent ruler across the world swept out of the dark heavy ruler. 7 broken sky feet. 1 foot. At the same time, Kaimang also followed him and swept out. Under the blessing of different fire, the terrible fighting spirit swept away the cold wind between heaven and earth in front of Xiao Yang in an instant. At the same time, Xiao Yang also took advantage of this short moment to exert all his strength under his feet. With a sudden flash of his body, he appeared in the void hundreds of feet away. At this time, Xiao Yang in Xiao Yang's arms, the tip of his dexterous nose breathes the unique breath of Xiao Yang, but a warm smile appears on a slightly pale pretty face. Drink. Once again, the huge ruler in Xiao Yang's hand waved fiercely, and terrible ruler horns waved out from the huge ruler in Xiao Yang's hand, sweeping fiercely across the cold wind-howling sky. Wherever the foot horn passed, the cold wind between heaven and earth was instantly incinerated into nothingness, and even the water vapor in the air completely disappeared at this moment. Under the foot horn, even the air breathed by Xiao Yang and Murong Chanxian became extremely dry and warm. Drink. 7 Broken Sky Ruler. Broken. After fierce bombardment, Xiao Yang went all out, and the body shape of a black robe was constantly flashing on the void. However, even so, Xiao Yang at the moment was still a long distance from the snow peak. After countless bombardments, the fighting spirit in Xiao Yang's body has consumed more than half. However, Rao is so. At the moment, the cold wind around him is still powerful, and the terrible low temperature constantly bombards the different fire barrier around Xiao Yang. At this moment, the strange fire barrier that originally shrouded Xiao Yang's body 10 feet away has also been forced to retreat back to the distance of Xiao Yang's body less than 10 feet. After countless times of exerting his fighting skills, Xiao Yang at the moment has also felt powerless. The horror of this cold wind is much more terrible than he imagined. Even if he goes all out, it is difficult to leave here today. Wheezing. He gasped fiercely. Xiao Yang turned his wrist and put away the mysterious ruler in his hand. Immediately, his mouth opened, and different fires were spit out from Xiao Yang's mouth and suspended in front of Xiao Yang. Put down Murong Chanxian in his arms. The latter noticed Xiao Yang's meaning, and the jade hand holding Xiao Yang's body was also slowly released. His face was pale and hid behind Xiao Yang. Old bone, help me, Xiao Yang said heavily in his heart. However, in exchange, there was a silence, and Guyo was indifferent to his words. In this regard, Xiao Yang can't help but frown. Unexpectedly, Jiu chose silence at this moment, but then Xiao Yang frowned slightly suspiciously. Jiu's silence made him feel uneasy. For a long time, Xiao Yang had to sigh helplessly in his heart and take back his eyes. Xiao Yang just set his eyes on the different fire in front of him and wanted to condense the Buddha's anger lotus. A clear and indifferent voice like a silver bell suddenly spread among the world. Human boy, who are you and why did you break into the king's territory? This video will end here.